Welcome to Don't You Forget About Me, the New Wave Music Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm T-Bone.
We'd like to welcome you back to our second episode. Today we're just going to be discussing two different artists. The first one will be the English Beat.
And then after that, we are going to talk about the latest from the Ocean Blue.
So let's jump into it with the English Beat. The English Beat, you may remember from they had such hits as Save It for Later. Mirror in the Bathroom.
Mirror in the bathroom, please talk free. The door is locked, just you and me. Can I take you to a restaurant that's got glass tables you can watch?
Later when the Beat split off, broke up, they went on to form General Public. They had some hits as Tenderness.
Next night you'll know, music searching for tenderness.
And of course, the guitarist and the bass player for the English Beat went on with Roland Gift to form Fine Young Cannibals.
Yep, and then Dave and Ranking Roger both split up, and Ranking went over to the UK. Dave took over the US. Dave still tours as the English Beat. So with this album here, is Here We Go Love.
Right, yeah, 2018. The album was financed through crowdfunding, which I did, and it was one of the longest 4 years ever. It started in 2014, and the album was finally released in 2018. It seemed like 10 years, let alone 4 years, because Dave and gang would tour relentlessly in order to make money to return to the studio to do a song here and there, and then return back to the road to make more money to keep financing going into the studio.
Now on this album, is it the English Beat? Is it the Beat featuring Dave Wakeland, or is it Dave Wakeland? I've seen it listed multiple times.
Yeah, on the cover art it says The Beat starring Dave Wakeling. So I don't know. I'm still going to consider it the English Beat. That's what I'm used to.
Yeah, I mean, they've been touring enough now with just Dave as the English Beat. I think it's
You
safe
could
to
go either
assume.
way. You really could go either way.
And listening to this, I mean, you're going to kind of hear it. I think we'll probably discuss it. Some tracks are just like the English Beat. Some are just like Dave's solo album. And there's even a few that kind of borderline General Public.
Right. And and there's some that are maybe a little less interesting than any of those three. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. The thing is, I think without original members such as David Steele, Andy Cox, Everett Morton, and the legendary Saxa, the musicians are very good on this album, but I just don't think they're as tight instrumentally.
It is how it says. It's starring Dave Wakeling.
Yeah. No, it's his band. There's no doubt about that.
So we'll jump into it. We kind of mentioned, let's start a little bit through not really the track listing of the singles. I want to jump into how you mentioned you did the crowdfunding. And that was a multi-year process.
Was it ever?
And I think the first song that they teased for, well, I don't know if a year or two long as a tease, but I think it was The Love You Give.
The love you give lasts forever, even when you're gone. The love you give lasts forever, wait till years yourself.
Right, and so, that I don't necessarily think that's one of the better songs on the album. I think maybe it just came down to Dave having a finished track, maybe the first that he had finished for this album, and so that's why he put it out as a little teaser for this, the Here We Go Love album.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if it was the first single on this. I really don't know if there were singles released, but the first track that's on this album, I'm not sure if it's the first single that was released, was How Can You Stand There?
How can you stand there? How can you stand there? Run, baby, baby, run.
Right, yeah, and I gotta say, it's a great, strong ska start. Both this song and the next one, the one and only, really will get your feet dancing. I was very happy to hear those starting off this album.
Yeah, I mean, How Can You Stand There? That to me sounds like if you would have listened to it way back, could easily come off of one of the first three English Beats albums. It doesn't miss a beat.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. And it even kind of picks up with Dave subtle about how he's always wanted to be kind of, he's a little bit more on the political side.
Right. Oh, yeah, and a number of these songs here on this album really kind of articulate Dave's political viewpoints, along with other songs that are more love songs, shall we say, and don't really have that sort of approach to his political beliefs. But yeah, How Can You Stand There definitely does fall into that category.
So let's talk about Redemption Time.
This is redemption time. World without end. We're right on the edge of time. We're flying again.
Right, yeah, a reggae tinged song. I really like how the horns fade in and out on that song. It definitely is a little bit more on the beat side of things, not necessarily the Dave Wakeling solo kind of side of things. So it's a song that really works for me, but I really do like the more reggae tinged sound to it.
Yeah, and see, for me, that one kind of reminded me of some General Public vibes.
Oh yeah, no, I could definitely see that also. Absolutely. And then after that, we get to If Killing Worked.
If killing worked till the world's by now. If killing worked till the world's by now.
And like I mentioned, if there's any songs on this album that take a look at what Dave's political feelings are, this anti-war song would probably be at the top of the list.
Yeah, this one's definitely not like some of the others where it's a little subtle. It's pretty much
Pretty
on
much
you,
slaps you right in the face. There's no doubt that he's putting across a political viewpoint on this album, and this song really focuses on that.
I'll be honest, this album took me a few listens to kind of get some songs to grow on me. This was one that the first listen through was kind of meh.
We want to kind of just talk about that right now and then get back to some of these songs. This album didn't really do a whole lot for me initially. Upon repeated listening, it did grow on me, but I must say that if you're a beat completist, a beat fan, then yeah, I would definitely recommend this album. If you're new to the beat, probably stick with their first couple of albums or Greatest Hits.
So we go from If Killing Worked, we go to Here We Go Love.
The stupid brick. I think and I think and I think and I think and I think until you get up. Here we go, love. Here we go, love.
Yeah, and this one is actually now a staple with them playing live. And it has Dave at what I would call his truly foul-mouthed best.
I love this song.
I do too.
It's one that's probably my favorite of the album. It's one you're not going to hear pretty much anywhere. And if you do listen to it, make sure your headphones are on at work when you're listening to it.
Yeah, that, and maybe if you have kids in the car, maybe skip this song and wait till they've gone to school or something.
But it's a great ska song, great, almost kind of the punk ska an attitude.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then you go from the up-tempo Here We Go Love to Never Die.
We said we would never die. But what did we know?
Right, yeah, a very contemplative, slow song. He's also made this one of those that he and the beat play more in concert now, and it's really good. It kind of takes Dave to a little bit slower pace. And really features his vocals strongly. I was very happy with it.
Yeah, this is one, like I said, had to grow on me on the album. And I'll be honest, I really didn't care for this one until we saw him. Well, we've seen the beat multiple times a year. But it was right after Ranking Roger passed away. And you could just tell the emotion with Dave, how much this meant to him.
Right. I would not, I don't know for sure. I haven't really read anything specific to it, but I would not be surprised if this was in tribute to Ranking Roger. Yeah,
and it just, seeing Dave and the passion he had behind that live actually gave me a whole new respect for this song. And I do like how it does start off slow. Mm-hmm. It is definitely not your upbeat, happy song. But they do bring it to the end. It does start to end on upbeat.
Right. No, and the tempo really starts to build up in the song. And it's really a nice change from beginning to end.
And then there's another track on this album that for me should not have worked, but it grew on me. And it's called Dem Call It Ska.
To hold you till tomorrow. Yeah, what a man said. Dem call it ska. What? You come from Jamaica.
Right. right. Obviously a ska song. I mean, you can tell just by the title, but it also has some great toasting from King Shasha, who kind of took over Ranking Rogers' spot once the two guys split up and formed different bands. And I mean, it's a fun reggae song that you can kind of hear everybody getting involved on, and
it does a great job featuring pretty much everybody in the band. If you have a chance to see the English Beat, please go see them.
Oh yeah,
They're
absolutely.
a fun show, especially now when we've gone almost 2 years without concerts.
Yes.
The English Beat are starting to tour again. So, and then closing out this album for me, the other track I liked it towards the end was "Driver Away."
Oh, no question. I think actually this is one of the better songs on the album and definitely one of the best songs on the second half of it.
And then there's a few that just, for me, just did not work. And I really like the English Beat, but there's a few of these songs that just felt like they were stretching out just to complete an album.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, I mean, the last song on the album, Be There For You, it is 7 minutes long, and it really should have felt like it should really be
3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes. Yeah, it just goes on too far. It goes on too long to stay interesting. Absolutely. And I think Steve and I would probably definitely agree both that with some exceptions, the second half of this album is a little bit too much filler.
Yeah, it's kind of like back in the day when you had the cassette. Your A side you probably wore out more than your B side, and the B side maybe had one or two songs that you back in the day had to learn how to fast forward that really well and end where that song ended.
Well, isn't that the beauty of CDs and
digital
and streaming now in digital? Yeah, Dave stacked, I think, the first half of the album with the more interesting songs. It's worth listening to the whole thing for sure. There are some good songs in that latter half of the album, but no, in my opinion, it definitely is a better first half of the album. So this is actually the first Beat album, first studio album since 1982's Special Beat Service, which is 36 years, and 31 years since David put out his one solo album.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you're saying, T-Bone, I do like this album. I don't love it as much as I'm going to recommend every track, but I definitely recommend still picking it up because it's been over 3 decades since you've got something from the English Beat, and that some of these bands, you just can't replicate that sound, even if it's just Dave.
You can get sometimes, right?
So again, if you do see them, the English Beat, they are touring fairly regularly now. If they do come to your town, I would heavily recommend going. They're always a fun show. Dave never really does a set list. It's all from memory and kind of paces it with the crowd and the reception he's getting, so it makes it unique. And he's one of those artists that you can tell truly still just has a passion and enjoys what he's doing playing live.
Yeah, could not agree more. Definitely worth seeing.
Which brings us to our next band, which is the Ocean Blue. They're a band out from Hershey, Pennsylvania, founded by 4 young lads. David Schretzel, Bobby Minton are both original members.
And then, of course, Ed Rohn, who does guitars, keyboards, and vocals, and Peter Anderson on drums.
And you may remember the Ocean Blue. They had such hits as Between Something and Nothing, Drifting and Falling,
Round you, north, south. Drifting, falling on your own again.
Ballerina Out of Control,
But she twists and she whirls, dismissing it all away. Wasn't quite the same as it was yesterday.
They were going to be discussing their 8th full-length album, Kings, Queens, Knaves, and Thieves, which came out back in 2019.
And this is the only album that they've had since 1999's Ultramarine. This album was produced on the Corda label, which is partially owned and run by David, along with some other Minneapolis-based musicians.
And not to show my hand too early, but I think this is probably the best Ocean Blue album, and definitely my top album of 2019.
And I would agree. I absolutely love the first number of Ocean Blue albums. Hell, I had their first album on cassette, and but I must agree with you, Steve, that this album is just phenomenal. Every song on it is it may not play on the radio, but to me they're hits.
Yeah, and to me it definitely played heavily, especially in the dark year that was 2020.
Oh, Absolutely. Yeah, this came out just right on time in 2019. As a matter of fact, they were supposed to tour in 2020, and of course, we know what happened. But they are supposedly getting ready to start going back on the road again.
No, they actually are on the road right now.
Are they
on
back
weekends?
on the road
Yeah.
now? Okay, well, if they're in your area, do not miss them.
All right, so let's get into it. There's the first track and the first single was Kings and the Queens.
Right, immediately from the first note, you know this song is from the Ocean Blue.
Oh, very classic Ocean Blue. And if you're not a fan of Ocean Blue after this song, you might be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if you don't know the Ocean Blue, this is not one of those bands that you would really have to start on the first or second album to understand their sound. This album, their version of Dream Pop, it doesn't veer much from the original album sound. It's very similar.
This is a great album to pick up if you're looking for something new. You might recognize one of their songs from back in the day. There's really not a bad track on this album. It's not one that has any deep cuts, or they're
Absolutely not.
great.
Yeah, they've grown up since the days they were high school students on that first album, and they are producing music on their own that is very polished and professional.
And speaking of the production on this album, this is one that you definitely need to listen to on your headphones if you can. You're going to pick up so much more than you will driving in the car, having it on the studio.
I agree. For me, it was like the keyboards, the synthesizers that Ed throws in there a little bit kind of deep into the album, and so you don't really hear it as in the forefront. I think Dave and Ed's guitar work is probably the thing that most people are most familiar with, but his synthesizers and keyboards, they play a little bit underneath, and they really sound great, especially on headphones.
Yeah, and then with this album, it is definitely a collection of. I think David said it was a collection of love and death songs. Don't let that scare you.
No.
Great. The one thing I love about this album is each song complements the other one very well.
Absolutely. Yeah, they move in a great direction.
You go from Kings and Queens to jumping into It Takes So Long.
Wonderful song.
And then from there, you jump into one that's Love Doesn't Make It Easy on Us.
And let me tell you, Steve, this is my favorite song on the album. It has additional vocals from Minneapolis-based Alison LeBon and Charlotte Crabtree.
Don't give it away. Don't tear it apart. Don't give it away. Don't tear it apart.
Oh, I love when they kick in at that. That just makes the song. And I love how it just builds up to that too, to
Absolutely.
that chorus.
Yeah, it really fits perfectly into the song. And as a matter of fact, if you haven't checked out the video, definitely watch it. It's worth it for both the music and the imagery. I just can't give enough platitudes to this song on the album. As much as I love the whole thing, this song for me is what makes
the album. And then the next song, All the Way Blue, this is one that, to me, without listening, if I didn't know who the Ocean Blue was, I'd swear that this was kind of a borderline Echo and the Bunnymen song.
Oh.
Show me the way to your heart. I can delve in your ways of magic. I can learn all your ways of love.
Absolutely, I can see that. I think especially because of the crisp guitar work, which for me is the highlight, and Ed's lush synthesizer is stunning.
And again, this one here, listen to it on your headphones. You'll pick up so much more little detail.
Absolutely. Add to the next song, number 5 is Paraguay My Love. Which I believe is the first song that we heard off of this new album when they came live and played it in concert. And I was really pleasantly surprised.
I think you're right. I think we had the pleasure of seeing them live back in the end of 2019. And if you can see the Ocean Blue, I would definitely recommend seeing them live.
Yeah, Bobby's bass work on this song, I'll be honest with you, it lifts my spirits. I just love how it comes in a little bit separate from the song itself, and bounces along at a couple of different spots, and it just works perfectly for me.
And then a nice little follow-up to Paraguay My Love is the Limit.
Push it to the limit, then way past the limit. Push it to the limit, then way past the limit. Push it to the limit, then way past the limit.
I love again this one, how it just kind of builds up. You got that acoustic guitar going in there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of sounds like a train build-up, how it just kind of starts out slow and keeps going. And
oh, yeah, not to praise Bobby again, but it really has some amazing bass work and drums in it that are, again, one of those things that you really hear better when you have headphones on and can hear all the different instruments working with each other.
And then we get to the song that just reading it, you might think it was a Morrissey song or the Smiths song. There within lies the problems with my life.
Therein lies the problem with my life. Therein lies the problem with my life.
Absolutely. Well, and these guys, they readily admit that their influences back in the late 80s were the Smiths, Echo and the Bunnymen, a number of other different bands that we still listen to today. And so it doesn't surprise me that David would create a song that really sounds as though Morrissey just put it on his latest album.
Oh, but it's so much better than what Morrissey put out on his latest album. Don't want to offend our Morrissey fans, but prove me wrong on his newest stuff. We'll get there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
And then just to kind of close this out, I don't want to go, we pretty much have gone track by track, but to close this out, kind of another staple with the Ocean Blues, Ed takes over vocals for one of the songs, Step Into the Night.
I don't know what you're thinking or what it is you believe in, but those things just might escape you in the night.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, we were talking about that before recording this, and you can hear a little bit of a vocal difference between Ed and David, but the nice thing is it's not so drastically different that it takes you out of the album. It sounds like it belongs there.
Yeah, and I think even just like when we see him live, I think Ed only does one song the whole night, which kind of follows the flow of the albums.
And the album ends off with a great song called Frozen. It winds down, an amazing album with a beautiful ballad that for me has, again, superb use of bass from Bobby. Piano and the drums on it are just beautiful.
As we were re-listening to this for the podcast, I don't know if it's because we've seen him in the fall, but to me this is an ideal fall album.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree.
It goes with the season. It goes with the cooler temperatures coming in. I would highly recommend seeking out this album if you can find it. You will not be disappointed.
Right, and I agree. And I would also recommend going to kordarecords.com. That's KORDA records.com. And there you can click on the artist link and then on the Ocean Blue to see a number of videos off this album. I believe there's 4 or 5 of them there, as well as live performances and articles about the individual band members. Well worth taking a look at, whether you're a new fan or whether you've been with the band for the past 30 years.
And just real brief, some quick, since we don't get a whole lot of it, some new wave music news. Those of you that had Adam Ant tickets for, 2019, 2020 U.S. tour.
It seems so long ago.
He did put out something on his Facebook last week that said the U.S. dates are forthcoming. So hopefully in the next couple months, we get some dates.
All I know is I've got a ticket just sitting on my counter waiting to be used. And then also, Nights of Reb is going to be going back on tour with the original 4 members from the 1982 lineup. That's going to start at the 1st of November in Portland, and it'll end in early December in Houston.
And then just closing out, something I want to give a shout out or recommend. It's Andy Partridge of XTC has a 4-song EP out called My Failed Songwriting Career Volume 1, so there may be more.
We can only hope.
The first single I heard off of that was Ghost Train. That was enough to convince me to buy the album.
Let's get on this ghost train. It's gonna get
fantastic.
I highly recommend you pick it up. Now, this album, you're going to have to do a little bit of research or go old school on it. It is not digital. You're going to have to go through your music of retailer of choice, local hopefully, or Amazon. If you can't, the EP is fairly inexpensive, but it's well worth those 4 songs.
And didn't you say that these were 4 songs that Andy actually wrote for other artists, but they didn't?
Why
choose
it's
to
called
use
My
them?
Failed Songwriting Career. And inside the old, again, this is one of the things why you want to go physical versus digital if you can. You get the liner notes, or the liner notes in the EP talks about how he wrote these for different artists and they got rejected for one reason or another. He doesn't throw any of the artists out under the bus who they were written for, but
But he decided to use them for themselves.
he decided they were great songs and wanted to record it.
No, they are good songs. Yeah. And then I just want to mention that Mr. Billy Idol, he has a new EP out.
Hello, goodbye. There's a million ways to die. Should have let me wait.
And it has also 4 songs on it. Now, this one is available digitally, so you can download it or stream it from your favorite provider. It's great to hear him back with Steve Stevens on guitars, and definitely well worth a listen.
To just close out this episode, we'd like to thank all our listeners for their support on our first episode that we had. The response we got was phenomenal. And if you guys have any recommendations that you'd like us to review, any albums, throw it up on our Facebook page. Don't you forget about me, the New Wave Music Podcast.
And then also, we do have our email address. We'd love to get album recommendations to talk about, or you can just let us know what you think about the show, or you can just simply say hi. And that email address is Don't You Forget Podcast, and it's don't without the apostrophe. So DONT, You Forget Podcast at yahoo.com.
And just a quick tease that before we sign off, to give you a heads up on what we're looking for the month of October. Our first episode out in October will feature Danny Elfman, former lead singer of Oingo Boingo. He's got a new solo album, which we'll be discussing, along with the Oingo Boingo remastered albums that were put out by Rublin Records. And later in October,
We are going to discuss the last 2 albums from the legendary Gary Newman.
thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.